Hello, I'm hoping this is coming through. Hello, welcome to Home's World Theatre Day Zoomcast. Is that a thing now? It is now. I'm Kevin Jameson. I'm the head of program at Home, and I'm going to host this session today with Jude Christian and Dave Moutrey from Home. So I'm currently in a virtual theatre one at the moment, so you can remember what this great space looks like. As we go along for this session, there's hopefully everyone can see a Q&A or question and answer box at the bottom bar. So if people want to ask questions as we go along, use the question and answer box at the bottom, and I'll be able to kind of collate them and ask them to Jude and Dave as we go along. I would also put out a general plea for patience with us, because Zoom was something I'd never heard of a week ago, and now I've never stopped using it. So we'll see how we go along, and we should be here for around an hour as well. So we are recording this, so this will be available online after we finished if you want to shoot off or if you miss any bits of this. So as I said, this is World Theatre Day, possibly one of the strangest World Theatre Days we've ever had, because just about every theatre is closed around the world, with theatre makers self-isolating or staying in their own homes. But hopefully for this session, we can also celebrate why we all love theatre in its many forms, and why we're all very excited that we hopefully can reopen very soon, and all the venues around the world can reopen and welcome audiences back to see plays, musicals, productions, and everything else that theatre has in store. So before we kind of really kick off into chatting around things, I thought I just want to let Jude and Dave introduce themselves. We have Dave Moutrey here, who's the Chief Exec and Director of Home, and Jude Christian, our Associate Director of Home. So I'll throw over to them just to explain a bit about their roles and who they are.
Hello, good afternoon. There we go. I've got a virtual home office in the back here. This is the image of the home office when we left it on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, my name is Dave Moutrey, as Kevin said. I'm the Director and Chief Executive of the Home, and my job is overall responsibility, well, for everything actually, but I've got a great team of people who do loads of stuff, but generally I focus on the overall shape of the programme and making sure that what we do through that programme meets our charitable objectives and aims as an organisation. The last week or so, though, I mean, it's only a week on last Tuesday that we actually closed the building to the public, and Tuesday this week that we emptied the building and went on to mothball the whole facility. And that's been quite a big exercise, both in terms of securing the building and making it's a big building, it's a complicated building. You can't just flick a switch and everything's off. You've got to go around and power things down. So that was quite a big job, and the team did that brilliantly. So everybody's now working remotely online, like the rest of the country. But also we've had a lot of work to do around refunding people for tickets and that sort of thing. And one of the interesting outcomes from the fact that we closed down is the fantastic response of the team at Home to the challenge that's been presented to them, which none of us have faced before. So that's been amazing. The response of our stakeholders, that's the Arts Council, the British Film Industry Institute, I should say, the Arts Council, I mentioned Arts Council, the Manchester City Council and Greater Manchester Combined Authority, who've all been astonishingly helpful. But the thing that's been truly wonderful is the response from our audiences and broader attenders and participants. There's been so much love shown towards our organisation. It's been truly humbling, and has just been really important fuel for us, making sure that we get the building open as soon as we possibly can to repay all that love that everybody's given us. So that's me and where things have been the last couple of days. Jude.
I figured out the technology. Hello everyone, my name's Jude Christian. I'm the Associate Director at Home. Technology, clearly not my thing. I'm zooming in from my actual home office, which as you'll see if you can see my sort of desk in Home's office in Dave's background, the two are sort of similarly haphazardly cluttered, which is how I live my life. So yeah, I'm the Associate Director at home. I sit primarily in the theatre team, but obviously as an organisation, we work across art forms and look for ways of collaborating as much as possible. So it's really exciting working in such a sort of multifaceted and varied organisation. My role involves being part of programming conversations that we have at home and supporting projects right through from sort of commission stage to appearing on our stages and beyond. I make a little bit of work as a director, and I sort of offer dramaturgical and artistic support to things that are happening in and around the building. And one of the things I've been asked to speak about today is homemakers, which you guys might have seen some information about online. It's a project which we have launched quite quickly in the last week as a direct response to what's going on around the world at the moment. Obviously, it's a really challenging moment for theatres and arts institutions generally, for theatre makers, whether they're part of organisations and companies or whether they work independently. And in amongst taking stock of the big picture and thinking about what are the sustained levels of support and what is the long-term thinking that we need to be doing, we wanted to come up with something that felt quite direct and quite active, and it felt like an interesting opportunity to work with some of the artists that we love, either from the Northwest or from elsewhere in the country, who bring their work to our stages, who think really innovatively about form and ways of connecting with an audience. And obviously we're in such a specific situation at the moment. We didn't want to stop making art. We didn't want to stop bringing artists to our audiences. And so we've given an open brief to a set of brilliant artists, saying that inviting them to create something in their own homes that will then be shared through our website on a pay what you decide basis for an audience who are in their own homes. So watch this space and we'll let you know how that goes, but we're really excited to see what they come up with.
Do you want to just take everybody through who the artists are?
Yeah, so we've got Yusra Wasama and Chris Thorpe working together on a project. We have Bryony Kimmings, Javad Alipour, Plastercast Theatre, and oh my god, I just said their name completely wrong, Ad Infinitum.
Thanks for that. Just again, another kind of shout out to all the people that are kind of watching this. If you've got any questions for Jude and Dave, do use the Q&A box at the bottom bar, so I can see that. So be thinking around kind of what you might want to ask Dave and Jude. I'm going to kick us off just really to roll off the back of the Homemakers project, Jude, really. I mean, there's been a lot of responses and debate from theatres and theatre makers in the last week around what does theatre look like and mean in a lockdown kind of scenario, and also kind of live versus digital. We've had a question from Rosie Adams via email. She's asked to both of you, do you think that virtual theatre will bring live theatre to the masses during the coronavirus outbreak, but also in the future to anyone unable to attend a live performance for whatever reason? So what do you both think around that sort of provocation?
So I think for me, theatre is such a multifaceted thing, and it's really interesting to see the absolute breadth of responses to the very strange and unique situation that we find ourselves in. And obviously everyone's got very different and sometimes very strong opinions on live theatre, on online streaming, on different ways that people can engage with work. But I think that what feels really exciting and really positive, as you say in this question, is that this is an opportunity to bridge one of the things that is brilliant about theatre, but also that's really challenging, which is that by and large it's predicated on the idea that people will gather in the same room as one another. And for reasons of geography or finance or access or people's own living situations, often there are people who for whom that is much more difficult to do than others. And so I think there is something really beautiful and really exciting in this particular moment about the fact that a lot of work will be created and a lot of work will be put on offer that is accessible to people who for whom this situation is not unusual, and for whom not being able to travel to a theatre building and spend time with other people is not unusual. For me, I have a real passion for theatre being a live art form, and one which absolutely connects kinetically with its audiences. But I do think, as well as the artistic challenge of playing with form here and playing with different platforms and ways of speaking to people, I think there's a real positive outcome from this, which I hope will continue going forward, whatever the new landscape is, which is thinking really innovatively and really holistically about connecting with people who can't come to the theatre.
Yeah, I think it'll bring a form of theatre to people, and it's enabling people to engage with the important stories that artists have got to tell or have been telling. The technology's been with us for a while. We can do this. The thing that's been holding everything back hasn't been the technology. It's been more to do with the licensing of the rights for various things, and also how do we pay the artists for their work effectively like this, because at the moment a lot of stuff's been streamed free on the basis that this is a very difficult set of circumstances, but actually there's a whole rights issue thing that's quite complicated there. But for me personally, I think without wishing to get too sort of spaced out and hippie, I think being in a place with people telling stories is a sacred thing, and the theatre falls into that for me. Going to music gigs like that, and actually being in the same place watching a film is also a really important thing. And that human connection is vital, and I think it'll become people value that even more when we come out the other end of this. It's important that it gets people to see those stories who might not be able to get to it, but I don't think it'll ever completely replace it.
We just had a question come in which kind of connects into this as well, I think. Will work in the future commissioned by Home be centred around video and immersive experiences? What are your thoughts about artists not making work in this way? Should they adapt?
For me personally, I think no, don't adapt. I think the joy of theatre is that there are so many different ways that it can be made. And I think that, the joy of being an artist is that you use what tools there are at your disposal. If you discover something that allows you to create a picture on stage that you couldn't do without it, or something that allows you to speak to an audience in a way that you couldn't do without it, then brilliant, utilise that. But I don't think there's ever any one way to do it. And I think that definitely, we as an organisation aren't, in relation to what Dave said, we definitely don't have a vested interest in going, we want to move solely to a place of video or digital content or online streaming, or even, the use of film technology in work. I think we have always created a really, really varied programme. We've always looked for artistry and innovation in all forms of making work, and I don't think that's going to change as a result of this situation.
I think conceptually the organisation has always been, if you think about the name Home, the building has been designed to be a front room for the city where people come and hang out together, and that collective relationship with the audience, between the audience and the artist, is so inbuilt into what we are as an institution. We might do more of that sort of online work, but I would agree completely with Jude. That's amazing, isn't it? We're both on the same page. I completely agree with Jude that don't change your practice. Do what you do.
And just one sort of follow-up around kind of COVID-19 and coronavirus is, someone's asked, do we envisage the programme at Home changing post-COVID-19?
I think it's inevitable. It will. I mean, we already know that we've got a season planned for next year, from September onwards, and there's a lot of things that are being changed because companies, particularly theatre companies, have had to change their plans because it takes a certain amount of time to rehearse and make a piece of theatre. And if your artists are from other parts of the world, getting those artists in the same place takes a bit of time as well. So that's changed, both in terms of as far as the programme. But I think, and I know that the team at Home is starting to think, that we're going to be in a different world whenever the buildings reopen. People are going to want different things. People are going to ask about different things. And our programme is about the contemporary. It's about issues that we're dealing with. So we'll be starting a series of conversations internally next week about what that looks like, what that means in terms of our theatre programme. So it won't be the same, but I can't tell you what it's going to be yet.
I think as well that I think that everything that David said is true. I think, as I say, that artists are always innovators, and because we have a particular focus on contemporary work rather than sort of classic repertoire at home, I think that we'll continue to see artists responding really directly to the world that they live in. I think that one thing that is going to change fundamentally is less what the work is, because I think the work is always varied and new and responsive, but I think the structures within which we make work will change. And I think that in amongst the confusion of the moment that we're currently living in, I think the really important thing that arts institutions can lead on and can have really close dialogue with the freelance and independent work sector in theatre about is, what are the opportunities here to address systemic problems or systemic challenges in the way that theatre is made across this country and around the world. And I think that, as I say, in amongst the sort of the many negatives of the situation that we're living in, there are some real opportunities here for positive change if we work collaboratively and if we think daringly about what the future could be.
I think you touched on some important points there, Jude, and the key one for me is that the economic model that theatre's worked on in the UK for the last 10, 15 years hasn't worked. It's been teetering along on a knife edge, and this crisis has exposed the level of sweat equity that goes into making theatre and the amount to which it's low margin, high turnover industry. And I think the first thing is recovering from that is going to take some sort of monumental investment, and it's going to be a huge job across the piece. I'm talking about nationwide, worldwide actually, but also fundamentally the ethical base of what we do and how we do that and the way we do it is going to be seriously under question, I think.
Thanks, Dave. There's also just been another question around, will there be any other open call outs for artistic responses to the current climate in addition to the selected commissioned artists that we've mentioned?
I can say very specifically with relation to homemakers, obviously the moment that we're living in means that we're, like everyone else, working under really limited financial resources. But what we're looking to do with the project is expand it in several different ways, looking for collaborators in other places who might be able to come and work with us on it. Having an open call is definitely one of the hopes and plans as part of that. I think it's a really important way of engaging with artists. Obviously, all companies have artists who they, particularly in the current moment, feel a real sense of responsibility to, as well as feeling a general love and admiration for. But we're very aware that the open calls are a brilliant way for organisations to engage with whole new groups of people, or even people that they know, and just give those artists space to step forward. So we're gonna do everything that we can, and I think absolutely in our longer term planning that will continue to be a part of what we do. Yeah.
Right. So, with it being World Theatre Day, I thought I would ask both of you, where is the wildest, most far-flung, unexpected or unusual place that you've ever watched theatre?
Shall I go first? I'm assuming the silence is yes. The wildest place that I've ever seen theatre is the Minack, which is a theatre that's hewn out of the cliff face in Cornwall, overlooking the, I'm not quite sure whether it's the Atlantic or the Irish Sea, I think it's the Atlantic. And when the sun's setting, it's absolutely glorious. But if the weather's not so good, You've got to be really hardy to watch things there. But it's an amazing setting, and it's even worth visiting if you're not actually seeing the show, just seeing the thing itself. The other thing I was going to mention was that I once saw National Theatre Wales do an immersion version of, I think it was Richard III in a huge disused aircraft hangar just outside of Cardiff, which was both very challenging technically, but also incredibly exciting artistically.
I think I really struggled with this. With this question. I think one of the most surprising places that I've seen a piece of theatre, I wouldn't say it was particularly sort of wild, but it struck me in a really unexpected way. I was working in Portland in Oregon a couple of years ago, and was invited to an event that was taking place in a local theatre as part of Martin Luther King Day. And there'd just been an open invitation to anyone in the community who wanted to gather, and they had printed out the entirety of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, and everyone who wanted to take part was given one sentence from it. And they just stood in a circle in the middle of this big room and read out the speech line by line, which was sort of an incredibly simple idea, but it felt so poignant and surprising. And there was just this really beautiful sense of the purpose of theatre, and this sort of communal desire from that community to come together and celebrate those words and to affirm a commitment to them, because obviously everyone's speaking it in the first person, and it was really beautiful just hearing it come out of that variety of mouths.
Wow, sounds amazing. There's so many amazing places to see theatre in the world, and there will be again very soon. We've had another question from Alison Criddle, which is asking about how can theatres, producers and artists collaborate to embed environmental sustainability and carbon emission reductions into their work, which I know is something Home has high on their agenda. And Jude, you've been doing some work around this for the season ahead. Yeah,
I have, and I think generally the key is in the wording of that question. I think we have to collaborate. I think everything is so interlocked in our industry, and particularly as organisations, we're really responsible for the way that freelancers move between our buildings or between companies. We have the ability to make it possible for them to make work in a way that accepts that we're in a climate emergency as well as everything else. And that problem isn't going to go away. So I think there are certain practical steps that we are taking at Home that we're looking at exploring in our new season. I think that one of the key things that we're doing is creating a framework where we can trial different approaches to working. So creating structures where, for example, we can work with local organisations who might be able to provide existing resources that could be fed into the design process, so that a designer and a director and a creative team can start to think about creating their pieces of theatre out of the world that already exists around them. And that requires legwork from us as an organisation. It requires us to support those artists differently to do their jobs. But crucially, I think it requires us to commit to a period of exploration and to really trial that through, and to really work in dialogue with artists and audiences about that, rather than, I think there's definitely a time for action, but taking those steps in our next season felt potentially more useful in the long term than instantly imposing a brand new framework. I think these things take time, and I think you have to do things in order to figure out how they're going to work. So I think that, again, with the opportunities that we have to just take stock of how we work and to make necessary shift going forward, I think, again, there are opportunities there for us to be quite radical in the way that we approach the making of theatre going forward.
What Jude said, and also I think that just the climate crisis isn't going to go away, but I think also we'll learn a lot about our lifestyles in this lockdown period and the difference that makes to our lives. So I think that's going to influence the way we think about that we do our jobs as well. But I think one of the biggest things we've got to do as a theatre sector is understand the things that actually make a difference. And to do that, we've got to be able to measure things like our carbon footprint accurately. We've got to measure what makes us different, what really makes a difference. So, banning plastic cups from our venues and plastic water bottles is a good thing to do, but does that really make the sort of difference in the systemic change that we need in order to reduce our carbon footprint? And I don't really know the answer to that, but we need to know the answer to that. It's not just about the things that seem obvious and simple. My guess is the biggest part of all of this is going to be around travel, about business travel and moving stuff around and audience travel. And really, we've got to get things like public transport sorted if we're going to make a difference in that. And that's a longer term job. But we have to have the data behind our arguments in order to make those arguments particularly effectively.
Right, thanks. And someone's commented on the Q&As about the handlebars, who they take everything on a bike to everything they do, and they're doing some fantastic work in terms of reducing carbon footprint on productions. We've got a couple of questions in which are kind of similar. One, I'll start with this one. I think the second one is a slight change to it. Do either of you have a dream project that you've been dying to get on the stages at home but haven't quite managed it yet?
I don't say what it is because it'll jinx it, won't it? If I say it, it'll not happen. There's loads of them, but I am a bit superstitious like that. I start talking about them. There's one that I'm working on at the moment with Anu from Dublin, who are a great theatre company. As Kevin knows, I've been banging on about this for ages, but dare I say it? No, I can't. It'll jinx it. It'll jinx it. I'm sorry, I can't. I'm too superstitious. Sorry. Find some salt. Go on my shoulder. Whoops, didn't mean to do that.
I mean, yeah, I've got loads. Obviously, I think I'm similarly superstitious to Dave, or just it's just the practical thing of going. It would be so heartbreaking if that didn't happen. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been working at home since July of last year, and it's actually the first time in my career that I've been part of an organisation like this. I've previously worked freelance. So what's really exciting is not only being able to have conversations about things that I would like to make and things that I think would suit our audiences at home and that could be really supportive to and supported by the building. But what is a sort of brand new dreamy part of my working life is being able to go to artists who I think are incredible and say, come and talk about making something with us, because it's something I've never been able to do before. And it's really pleasing to speak to people whose work I really, really admire, or to meet new people who I think are brilliant, and to say, I want to try and make this project happen, and it doesn't require me to be directly involved in any way whatsoever. But yeah, so there's lots and lots of dream projects. Hopefully we'll just make them all. We'll just do that.
Right. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, yeah.
Yeah, stick on the list. We've got some questions in sort of around independent artists and independent companies. So I'll run through some of them and try and group them where I can. But someone's asking, do you think that we should be investing in developing artists in localities rather than relying on artists from the large metropolitan centres?
I think we do. I think the last count was 2,500 hours of free rehearsal space we gave away last year. And the work we do in the Push Festival, etc. I mean, I think we do a lot of work with locally based artists. We try to balance that with bringing artists from not only metropolitan places, but also from around the world. We want to enrich the artistic ideas pool for everybody's benefit. So that's an important part of our work. Whether we need to do more of that in the future, I think it's going to be quite likely, actually, because of what the fallout from where we are now with the COVID virus and the lockdown means that we're probably going to have to do more work in this area. What that looks like yet, we don't know. But I certainly think we've got a pretty good track record in investing in local artists.
I think, yeah, I agree. And I think also it's really important to think about people's geographical location, I guess, in amongst conversations that we have about diversity. Because I think, aside from the fact that there should be equal access and opportunity for people in the kinds of worlds that we want to live in, I think when you bring in people who have a different worldview and a different experience and a different way of living, they realign your expectations and your horizons. And I think that one of the things that we don't think about is the difference between living in a big city and living outside of one of those places. I grew up in a very small village outside quite a small town, near not a very big city, and so it was sort of like several steps away from feeling like you were really in the heart of those metropolitan spaces where there is more access to the arts, particularly if it's something that you are thinking about as a career. And so I think, yeah, again, it's something that we need to keep in our minds as we evaluate in this moment what our working structures are. And again, there's an opportunity here for learning about going, when physical access to buildings is on a regular basis is a challenge because of where people live, what are the structures that we can put in place that again never stray from that belief that live theatre and connecting, but that look for ways of connecting people who don't just live bang in the city centre or thereabouts.
That's great. And someone's kind of asking, what is the value of independent theatre companies and smaller theatre companies? I'm kind of making a leap that they kind of mean in relation to home or venues. So, yeah, what is the value of independent theatre companies?
Oops, hang on a second.
Dave's looking up his big spreadsheet for the value.
No, I was trying to make sure I was on the right. I muted the thing. I will get used to this. Eventually I'll be really slick. No, independent companies are important to home because they bring in different artistic viewpoints, different cultural viewpoints, different sets of political ideas. So you know, all of those things are important to what we discuss and debate as an institution through our programme. They are an important place for artists, I think, to change the way that theatre is made. I think most of the changes in theatre across the world start in smaller companies because you can actually be more flexible and more fleet of foot. Bigger companies tend to be big machines and it's harder to make change. I see them as being they're legitimate in their own right. Independent companies and particularly smaller ones, but they also have a really important function to play as the R&D engine for the theatre world that we work in.
Yeah, and I think as a space, they fulfill a really particular function because I think that art can be made and artistic sensibility and relationships can be developed really, really quickly. You know, you can meet a group of people and within an hour you can just sort of jump something on its feet and all connect with each other, and that's great. But there's also a slow burn, long game, and I feel of having independent companies is the base in that. As you know, as a single artistic thing, moving from organisation to organisation, thing really at times valuable about that kind of slow cooker. That just gives you space, you know, to develop confidence in your ideas, to get good at the thing, and then to get bored and decide to do something. I think it allows for a really holistic development of people as individuals and their voices, and as Dave says, of sort of counterpoints and challenges and new directions, the wider.
Jude, are you still there? Jude may have just temporarily dropped out there. Oh, you're back. You're back.
Oh yeah, sorry. I just said something incredibly beautiful and eloquent, but now I'm being told by Zoom that my internet connection is unstable, so maybe nobody heard it. Sorry, it was great. Changed the face of theatre on this World Theatre Day.
Now, what advice, this is a question that's coming, what advice would you give to a young theatre maker or actor just starting out in their career? Jude, do you want to go to you first?
Yeah, so much advice. I think the three key things probably I would say is build your community, like build yourself a network of people who you can trust, and I think earn their trust and demand that they are trustworthy to you, and share things really generously with your friends and your collaborators. Be excited for other people as their careers develop in different directions, and tell them when you need support, because it's a brilliant it's a brilliant way to work, but it can be quite exhausting and quite bruising. And just make sure that you've sort of amassed your peeps. I think don't be afraid of making practical decisions when you need to. I think don't ever feel like, you know, your artistic soul is being sullied by the fact that you need to do a job because you need some money, or you need to connect with an organisation, or you just want to learn how to do something, you just want to be going out there and working. So I think don't feel the need to sort of protect your artistic identity. Just trust that you can be varied and you can still know who you are. And I had a third point, and I can't remember what it was because I talked too long about the first two, which I'm really sorry about. But if I remember it, I'll come back to you.
Shall I jump in the meantime?
Yeah.
I would say I'm always astonished about the number of people who want to work in theatre and don't actually go and see any. You take as much advantage of seeing theatre as you possibly can afford. You know, if you haven't got a lot of money, find the cheap seat options and go and see stuff. And even seeing bad theatre is worth doing because at least you know why it's bad. You know, the whole thing. Read lots of play scripts. Read about directors' ideas around theatre. Again, you need to be informed. The theatre industry, I think Isaac Newton said, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, if you learn from that, that's really important. And the other thing, which is a minor point, don't whinge. There are plenty of people out there who moan about stuff, and moaning. It's a waste of energy. It's energy you could be putting into building connections, finding people to work with, making work. You know, it's about channeling energy in a positive way, rather than in a way that's either negative or even just neutral.
Thanks. Just on a sort of similar thing around training, someone's asked around, do we feel that it's going to be important for theatre technicians to learn more non-traditional theatre technologies, such as platforms like Zoom, to allow for creative work to be supported from here on in? Dave, do you want to start on that?
Yeah, sure, happy to. I mean, I think that we are increasingly seeing the rise of the multi-skilled technician in the theatre making space, people who are more than ambidextrous, multidextrous, whatever that is, who can do lots of things. I mean, you do need specialists in specific areas, but more and more technicians need to be well trained across a range of disciplines, because artists are blurring the boundaries between things so much now that you really need to be able to work with the grain of that if you're a technician. Jude, any?
I've remembered my third point, which is sort of applicable to this, which was ask people for what you need, which is, you know, don't be afraid to get in touch with people, but try as much as possible to articulate what it is you need, whether that's a general need or a very specific thing. And I think that absolutely applies to this question about evolving technologies. I think it's not about feeling like you have to have a comprehensive knowledge of literally everything in advance of every job or every conversation, but the more we all talk to each other, and for example, if there's a particular form of technology that's required in a project, if it's about technicians or designers or makers needing to get to grips with it, then just have those practical conversations. Don't be afraid to identify what's missing in the room, whether that's knowledge or a really, really sort of highly trained particular skill set. And then to figure out the best way to go and get that thing, whether it's somebody going and finding formal training or looking for more people to expand the team.
Great, thanks both. Someone's also asked about what was the turning points in your careers when you look back over your careers to date. So what was that turning point that you thought that's what changed it all?
And thanks, Kevin, for not mentioning that I've been doing this for over 35 years. The turning point for me was tied in with punk rock and the punk thing. So I was around when that was all happening, and there was somebody who I knew, a theatre maker in Leeds when I was a student there, who I was involved in a conversation about wanting to do something, and he pointed out to me in no uncertain terms, there were some expletives in the sentence which I won't repeat here, but it was, you actually don't need permission to make art, and that there are always ways of making. The whole punk ethos was just do it, and I think that's the thing that led me down the path that I've been on ever since. Yeah, I think it was being told that you don't need permission to make art. It's an obvious thing, but it just took somebody to slap me around the face with it, really.
Yeah, I think for me it's probably quite a similar thing. I can think of two key conversations which happened maybe sort of 5 or 6 years apart. One was actually when I was at drama school, and I went there because I wanted to learn how to be a director, because I hadn't known that existed as a job until I was in my early 20s. And when I found out it was a thing you could do, I was really intimidated and thought I needed to go somewhere in order to learn how to do that thing. And I had a really brilliant teacher there called Alex Clifton, who is actually now the artistic director at Storyhouse, and is an awesome human being. And I was just sort of having a bit of a meltdown at him, because I felt like, having fallen in love with theatre from quite a young age, but not really knowing much about how it worked as a profession, I felt like I'd picked a job, but maybe it would stop me from doing anything else, that I'd chosen to be a director, and that I would never then be able to be a writer or an actor or any of the other things that I had fallen in love with theatre through. And he just sort of gently but firmly just kind of said, like, if you want to create things, then you will just find the means to do it. Like, do what's in front of you right now, but you're not pigeonholing, no one's pigeonholing you except yourself. And you will find ways to make things. And then a few years later, I was sort of teetering on the edge of making a show, in the sense of writing it and performing in it. And I was working with a really incredible theatre maker called Lucy Ellenson, and I'd asked her to come and do an R&D with me, where I was sort of like trying to get her to be me and make the show. And again, with great gentleness and great firmness, she just sort of said to me, I think the main reason that you're asking me to do this is that you're just a bit scared to do it yourself, when that is the more obvious thing for this particular project. And so it was a nice little nudge over the cliff edge into a slightly more satisfying turning point of saying, okay, I want to call myself slightly different things at different times, and I want to work in slightly different forms for different projects.
Right, so from looking back, we've got a question about looking forward. So someone's asking, how do you see the cultural landscape in Manchester evolving over the next 5 years?
If you'd asked me that 2 weeks ago, I might have had a different answer to the question now. I don't know. I mean, obviously we've got factory, which is, I think the builders are still working on it. I don't know whether the building site's been closed down or not. But that's going to open in end of 21, I believe. That's going to have an impact on the landscape. But really, it really depends on how we get out of this thing and that we're in now. And I think there'll be a lot of conversations about what should we really engaging with now, and how do we look after each other better following the thing that we've just been through. So I think it's a bit hard to map out, to be honest. Hopefully we see Contact opening in the autumn, which is when they're due to open. They're an important organisation. We want to see them opening and working in the brilliant way that they do with young people. I mean, I think with them it'll only be a matter of when, not if. But it's just the timing of that. So I don't know. I'm rambling here because I really don't know. I think that we need a little bit more time to understand and analyse where we are now before we can get a real handle on that.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that, as Dave says, it's a complete unknown. I think I haven't lived in this city for very long. I moved here about sort of 3 years ago, and the thing that's really struck me is there's such a sense of communality in this city. I think institutions and companies and artists all speak to each other, and they really speak to each other, and there's a real sort of demand of ownership of how art is made and who it's made for, by the city and the sort of wider area as a whole. And so I think we'll see that develop but it does feel, it feels more unknown now than maybe it did 2 weeks ago, which is a very strange way to be living.
Whoops. Sorry, I didn't mean to flip over there. The one thing that I think will have made a big influence, will have a big impact, but this was going to happen anyway, is that the response to climate change will be a bit more, will be a lot stronger in the way that we make and present work than perhaps it's been. We'll be gradually developing new techniques on top of all of those other things we're going to find out about the way our society works now.
I just need to excuse myself for 30 seconds and get a plug to plug my laptop in. Sorry, bear with me.
Technology. Dave, I'll fire this one at you to begin with, and then Jude can come up to speed. Someone has asked about, came to see the Manchester Open in the gallery and thought it was a brilliant use of public space and public art that obviously attracted large audiences. Do you think that a premise like the Manchester Open for visual arts could work for theatre and film at home? So I guess the Manchester Open theatre and film edition, could that work?
We already do quite a lot of work with local filmmakers. It's the Filmed Up programme. If you have a look at our website, there's details about it there. So we do screen a lot of locally made work. And in addition, we work with the 2 universities and screen regular student short films there. So I think we sort of covered that one. From a theatre point of view, I'm going to back that one over to Jude in a second, but we are in a city that hosts the Bruntwood Playwriting Prize. So the Royal Exchange have got a big part of that covered. And to some extent, the Push Festival in January is a bit like the Manchester Open. It happens at the same time. We commission work for that as well as present work. So I sort of think we've got it. I can't imagine what more we might do in that area, but I might be missing a trick or an idea. Jude, any thoughts?
I think, yeah, I think there's not necessarily a direct transposition. I would sort of, I mean, I would hesitate to think that just because things are made in very different ways. I think there's the sort of, there's the obvious fact that that with particularly with visual art, you can make something and then it can be available to our audiences all of our opening hours for a 3-month period, which was one of the glorious things about Manchester Open. Whereas I think if we were to lock 500 theatre makers in T1 for 3 months and just sort of make them perform on demand all day, every day, I mean, I'd be quite up for that actually, but I suspect that lots of other people wouldn't. But I think, as Dave says, there's a lot of stuff that we do. I think we're always looking for new ways, either to develop particular projects or to develop particular pieces of work. As I say, that play with form and that play with how things are made and how they're put in front of audiences. So I would say as well, like, you know, for Manchester-based artists, keep talking to us because we're always excited to have conversations with people about what else we can do to connect with people and what else we can bring into our building or take out of our building into the wider community.
I mean, in a sense, Kev, we should sort of push that one back to you a little bit because it was you're the person who's really shaped the Push Festival. You know, the theatre point of view, you've taken that on from the very first one and shaped it. What do you think we could do more of on that front?
Dave, I'm here to ask the questions, not answer them. Yeah, I mean, the Push Festival kind of, you know, how I guess the core of the Push Festival, which happens every January, the core of that, I suppose, does run along the lines of the Manchester Open, I guess. You know, the point is we try and pack 2.5 weeks full of the most of the, you know, Greater Manchester Northwest artists that we can find to really showcase. We go and see a lot of work all over the region in various scales and various places to absolutely make sure that we're kind of showcasing as much as we possibly can. And a lot of them artists have gone on to kind of really kind of kick on with their careers. Not that that's necessarily what's bad, but we want to kind of feel that we're a kind of help and a cog, you know, for them artists to see, you know, audience see their work. We always attract a large amount of audiences, but yeah, I suppose as Jude says, it's just done in a very different way because it's at 7 o'clock for an hour and then we put another show on rather than it kind of running kind of all day, every day, like the Edinburgh Festival. So, you know, I would just back up exactly what Jude said, is that, you know, our details are on the websites. If your companies, your artists, you know, you want to get in touch, you think you've got something, let us know. We'll come see your work. We'll have a coffee with you. We'll buy the coffee. We might buy, you know, your cake. You know, like come talk to us. You know, we want to kind of get involved and see us out there. We're a fairly small team. We see as much as we can, but there's always more to see and more to hear about. So let us know, send us work. But yeah, the Push Festival really does that. And then it's also how we try to then commit to them artists to try and thread that through our year anyway, you know, and artists that are coming back, whether that be in other festival moments like Incoming Festival or Orbit Festival, but just through our year anyway, really. We are really committed to the locale that we're in, and not least because we're called home, you know. So, I'm going to pivot on to another question quite quickly. Someone has asked about obviously the coronavirus has highlighted the vital importance of those self-employed artists who work in a building like home. How else do you think that self-employed artists should be celebrated on a day like World Theatre Day? Quite a lot in that.
My sort of gut instinct is a bit in line with, for example, the really, really beautiful celebration last night of NHS workers around the country, which was quite rightly backed up by lots of people saying to government institutions, that's brilliant, and also please continue to support us by funding us. And I think of course, what we want to do in this moment is celebrate and give love to the many self-employed, not just artists, but people in every form of work who are the sort of lifeblood of the theatre workforce. But my sort of primary concern is find ways to keep employing them, and find ways as organisations to ensure that we've got the capacity to keep on doing that. That to me feels like the most urgent thing, but that's because I'm a sort of quite brutally practical person and maybe not very good at sentiment. I mean, I obviously think that all self-employed people are completely wonderful and should be celebrated, and should also celebrate themselves and take care of themselves in this particular moment. But I want them all to continue being the employed bit of self-employed. That's the dream.
We need to celebrate all artists, and definitely the self-employed ones. But I think we should be looking to find longer-term solutions. And for me, one of the things that this crisis has highlighted is, perhaps, I'm just going to put it out there, the need for a universal basic income, perhaps, and a way in which that people can build their lives around that, and maybe a greater investment in the creative sector, so we can actually employ more people on longer term contracts and adopt different ways of working. So yeah, I think it's about, yeah, we acknowledge and celebrate the wonderful work that artists are doing, the freelancers, the technicians out there, but I think we should be looking at what the future holds and really how our society values those people more.
Thanks, Dave. Just to say to everyone that's still with us, we've got about another 5 minutes, so there's still time for a few more questions quickly to get in. Just going back to kind of supporting artists, someone's asking also, how are we supporting artists with disabilities?
My real inclination in this moment is to throw this over to Marisa, who's our head of engagement, because I automatically assume that she's on hand. Not to sort of to throw this away at her, but just to talk as eloquently as she does about the brilliant work of her team and of the organisations that we work with. I think there are so many incredible disabled artists and artists with disabilities who make work at home and who we are actively looking to continue working with, or to start new relationships with in the future. I think, again, it comes back to practical terms. It's about thinking about structure. It's thinking about what we know are barriers to people joining the workforce, or to people being engaged by organisations like ours. It's actively listening and looking and searching for barriers that we're not aware of. And it's having really clear practical conversations as an organisation about how we work to remove those barriers. and to celebrate the artists who are out there, and to make sure that we're fostering new artists as we are with everyone.
Well, the main thing is by commissioning disabled artists and making sure that we have disabled artists within the various teams that we put together wherever we can recruit people. We aim to. Oh, so the other thing is we also work and support there's a local network of disabled artists in Manchester, which is an organisation which we support as well. So the building is probably one of the most accessible arts buildings, certainly in the city at the moment. It was designed to a standard called I've forgotten the name of the standard, but it's a standard above the Disability Discrimination Act minimum standard for buildings. So it's actually quite a good building for disabled artists to work in, and across all of our art forms we commission disabled artists, and we set ourselves targets each year in order to do that.
Right, well, I think we seem to have sort of, there've been no more questions. There is one which is non-theatre related, which is actually that people are intrigued by your poster, Jude, behind you on the wall. Do you want to give any context to your poster, your artwork?
No, I'm on camera so that people can see it in its entirety, but I think I'm just going to leave it as a beautiful mystery.
Lovely stuff. I like that answer.
So if you can guess what show it's from, then you get 10 points.
Okay.
Just 10 points. No cash value attached.
Well, I think that rounds up. It seems to be that's all the questions that we've had through. Thank you to everybody that's contributed either by watching or posting questions. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Jude, for taking the time out. I think that's a great way to celebrate World Theatre. If anyone's got any more kind of questions they want to ask, do keep in touch with Home through all the social media channels, and tweet us at home_MCR, and we'll try our best to get back to you. I hope everyone out there is staying safe, stays home, and see you on the other side. Thank you all.
Cheers, bye now.
Bye.